I think just because I already did like the video for
Yeah,
your
you
UN
already have
class. Like,
taught in the UE class.
now I'm older.
You're gonna have freshmen like 3 years from now being like, I know you.
Oh no.
See, that's what I'm waiting for, girl.
Someone to come into the library and like, you were in that video. Oh, you're in Kayla's class, aren't you?
Yeah. No, all the UE classes saw that video, not just mine.
Oh, I thought it was just yours because you know
Nope.
you're the live. Oh.
Every UE class on campus this semester saw it.
That's not gonna be like an annual.
I mean, we might use it next semester because the rules will probably be the same. But after that, we'd have to update it.
Yeah, it was mostly COVID stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see. Oh, goodness. Oh, thank you.
I have these little cards that will be flashing when we get close to the end.
Gotcha. Okie dokie.
Folding that chair next to you.
Yeah. Do you want me to grab it or?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Awesome, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Sorry, everybody.
So is this like any faculty or is it like specific like higher up people?
Anybody, though Dr. Carson and I think Dr. McGrain were listed as coming. That's the provost and the vice provost.
Oh.
But they may not get to. It depends with them. They're usually got a lot of stuff going on.
It doesn't look like anybody's there.
Just start talking.
Nope, it's just us and whoever's online. Hello. I think a lot of people get tired in the afternoon too, because this goes all day. It started at like 9 a.m. and it goes till 4.
Oh.
So by the time, especially after lunch, then you
Oh my goodness.
so.
There's nobody there. Yeah. There's not anybody in the room, and there's myself, Amanda Curtis, Stephanie Scheiding, Taryn Andrews, and Rebecca Shriver online, and that's it. Shriver. Yeah.
Oh, she's my teacher.
That's
my professor.
And this will be recorded, right?
Oh, and students are.
I'm gonna add it to my screen.
Alvarado, Bryce Endicott, and Hannah.
To watch it. I can link you the video, but it'll just be on the library YouTube. We have an OER playlist. So.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah, she said Paula and Wendy were signed up to come, but depending on what happens with their day. I don't know what help Amanda and I are going to be able to do. We don't have any questions. I was just here to see what everybody else had to say. So.
And
Alright. 2 o'clock. Do we want to start? Okay. Alright. Hello to everyone. My name is Kayla Reed. I am the systems librarian, and also I am the head of the OER subcommittee, which is part of the Digital Learning Advisory Committee. Had to think about what that's called now. And today I've assembled a small panel of very brave and willing students who are going to talk about their experiences of having classes with open educational materials in them. So first I'm going to just go straight down the line. If you guys would state your name, your year, and your major.
My name is Jocelyn Alvarado. I am a junior. My degrees are French and International Political Affairs.
I'm Hannah Sylvie. I'm a junior, and my major is history.
Hi, I'm Bryce Endicott. I'm an undeclared honor student in my sophomore year.
So how much do you usually pay for textbooks per semester? Just an average number you can think of.
It's usually around $100 to $150 per semester.
I've been paying roughly around $250 a semester.
For myself, I normally pay around $250 to $400 per semester.
And how often would you say you use your assigned textbooks? Now, these are just the required books, not the recommended purchase books, in your classes.
It varies per semester. Sometimes there are books that we do not use and it feels quite wasteful. And then there are other classes where the books are used every day in classroom and outside.
With most of my history courses, we use our books just about every day, but I do know like with some gen education classes, it kind of varies. So
I've had a similar experience where in my literature classes and history classes, my books are used regularly, almost every class, and sometimes sourced from, but within other kinds of classes, gen ed classes, math, science, sociology, etc., I barely even use my textbook, if at all. So yeah.
So what was the class that you took that used open materials?
So my first class that used open materials was American Government, and we had the online textbook through Blackboard that we did not have to pay for.
my first class was History 120, which is the U.S. history from 1877 into the present time, and we used the American YOP.
My first class was the same as Hannah's, American 120, U.S. history 1877 to present, using the American YOP.
Have you had any other classes other than the first one?
I believe I had another history class
Another history class?
that had an open textbook.
Yeah,
For
I've
me,
definitely had other ones. I'm not sure what the textbooks were.
Okay.
For me, it was a sociology class, but I don't remember what the textbook was called.
And it also a kinesiology class. I don't know what the textbook was called because I never opened it.
Okay. So what kind of materials did they use? Were they just free online textbooks, or did they have articles or book chapters or even like podcasts that they used instead? What was the materials?
Mine was predominantly online textbooks that were just accessed through the Blackboard.
The American YOP is a website that anyone can kind of access. You don't have to have any school prerequisites or anything. And it has there's a multiple college professors that have kind of worked together to put it out there, and it's updated regularly. And then there's primary sources that we can go and we can search. And sometimes there may be a podcast or something that a professor will give with that.
I'll use the sociology one as an example, but it was just a e-textbook, and that's pretty much what it is as base, and then there was some extra material like photographs and the articles to go along with it as like recommended reading.
So what did you like about that class with the open materials? And feel free to go into detail about what worked for you, what you really thought was great, and we'll go on the opposite end of the next question.
So I really liked the online textbook for my American Government class because I could take it everywhere. It was just through the Blackboard link. And then it also just made it easier because there was no cost to it. The professor stated early on that there would be no purchase required and that the Blackboard, the ebook was allowed for test when we had notes open. So when we took notes in class, she's like, you can have your laptop open to have the textbook open, as well as it was just really convenient for studying before test. I could just pop up with my laptop and have the book plus my notes just conveniently right there.
With the American YOP, the ease of access is just amazing. We don't have to pay for it, which is great, being low income. And then I can constantly reference it if I want to. Working in other classes, I was able to look up a chapter and maybe find a primary resource that I'd read before, and it's just right there on the internet. So.
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing was that accessibility from home, at work, or just in my car somewhere. I could easily reference it, and study, do homework. That was nice. And then that absence of that price was really good too. It's not cheap taking a class and having $200 to $400 in textbooks is really hard to deal with sometimes. But
just going off what Hannah said, I also really like that we were able to search through the textbook because it was an online book, and we didn't have to constantly like flip through the books. If there was a specific term, we could just type it into like a search engine, and it would just pop up the chapter or the relative term that we needed.
Kind of like the same thing with that was in this textbook, like the main concepts would be highlighted for you. There may be a vocabulary section, and it's really nice for referencing because you don't need to spend extra time flipping through a physical textbook.
And you don't have to ruin the textbook with highlighting. It has highlighting options
Yeah,
in
it's
the
nice.
textbooks often.
It's very convenient in general.
So what about those classes did you dislike? What didn't work for you, or what was difficult about them?
For me, my textbook had an audio option, and the only problem with that was it was very difficult to concentrate on listening and reading at the same time. I prefer either or. So I either read the textbook or I listened to it, but I did not like the audio male voice talking about the textbook. So that was very difficult to concentrate if I had both.
I am a nerd and I like books in paper form. So that was something that I guess bothered me is I liked being able to highlight things myself and being able to kind of like commit things through memory by remembering what page I was on and stuff. But probably after 2 weeks, I got used to working with it online.
So with American Yop, I find it really easy to like access and stuff. But with the sociology one, the navigating to it was not as easy as I would like it to have been. Sometimes it was a bit of a hassle, sometimes slow. Like some of the slower computers here on campus didn't handle it very well. In contrast to American Yop, sort of just quick and easy. But that was my biggest issue, was this sort of, it was complicated sometimes even to get to your assigned reading for that week.
I think the biggest difficulty is when the internet goes out, the book's out, and you don't have access to the paper copy. But that was that happened twice, I believe.
You do have to have the technology to use it. So if you do not have laptops or computers and you're not able to get into a classroom or something, which is something we've all learned this over the summer with COVID when the school was closed and we had to have very few computer labs open and all that. It is harder when your stuff is online. So.
Mentioning COVID too, this may be a great time to mess with online textbooks because people are at home more, they're messing with computers more, they're on campus more, using these resources, and maybe a good idea to implement these kind of OERs.
And this is an additional question, so I'll go. Was this free online textbook your first digital textbook, or have you had others that you've had to pay for in the past?
Yes, this one was my first during my first semester, and it was my first free online textbook. I have, however, had online textbooks, but we have to pay for the access code to have access to them for either a semester or an entire year. It kind of depends on what access you need. So,
I've paid for online resources before and textbooks, and like she said, I had an access code that I had to use, but I didn't really see much of a difference between the two of paying and the free one.
A similar situation was my first online textbook that was free, but I had it for others in the past. Same thing, really no diminishment in quality, and it was just solid.
So what would you, going up with the projector, what would you like to see more of at NSSU? Do you feel a movement towards electronic books or print books, or what do you feel is the best for you in a learning environment?
I would like to see an option for both. There are classes where it's easier to have in-person textbooks. However, there are times where an online textbook is easier. And given the COVID situation, online textbooks do seem to be a more predominant way of giving access to students who need materials for the class.
I feel like moving more towards online, especially if it's lower cost, is definitely better for students right now. We are used to reading on our phones and stuff already. I do like having an option of maybe having the print copy available. Like I know you can buy the American Yop as a print copy too, but I do think using the internet resources is just something that we need to work a little bit more on.
Yeah, that reduced cost is a big deal. I mean, sometimes people struggle just paying for tuition, room and board, transportation costs, and including textbooks can sometimes be a little taxing on people. So I like the movement towards online resources, but the biggest thing is just maintaining quality as well. Like not every online resource is perfect, but perhaps with some interest towards them, that will change with more people collaborating to create them.
Any other thoughts or comments from you guys that you'd like to put out there?
I would like to see a more encouragement to have students sell their textbooks back to the bookstore in order to have all those resources come back to MSSU. I think oftentimes we buy the books or we rent the books, and rental books have to be brought back, but textbooks that you buy, once you're done with the semester, they kind of just sit on your shelf, and it's kind of wasting resources. There should be a better system to pass them on to other students who will take that class later on in future semesters.
I like the mentioning of the bookstore. So the bookstore, that's kind of the place that's advertised as where to go to buy textbooks. But the prices sometimes at the bookstore are outrageous, to say the least. Sometimes 10 times more than what you can find on other external resources. And so that bothers me a little bit because, just with a little bit searching, you can buy a $16 textbook instead of a $160 textbook from the bookstore, and that's a little worrying to me. But
I've noticed that actually one of my professors this semester, he had assigned a book for us to purchase, and he'd assigned what he thought was the second edition, but the third edition. And apparently with the third edition, Cengage had bought that, which is kind of a big textbook company, and the price had gone up from $30 to $50 to $150. And we actually were missing some things because they wanted us to buy the electronic resource rather than the paperback resource. So there's definitely kind of a monopoly that goes on with textbooks, and we're kind of having to live with that as college students. And I'm a tutor at Southern, and I just have to say that electronic resources are just amazing if everyone can access it, because then if I'm tutoring someone in history, I can access the American Yop with them, and we don't have to share the textbooks, which is something we can't do right now. So,
as well as that, with the availability or the future availability of these OERs, the purchase of printed textbooks for these prices becomes a bit of a barrier to education. And I think that's important to understand too, is why limit how many people can get an education, even if it's just a little bit. Like some people, they struggle just to pay that extra few $100s for textbooks. And I'd like to see that barrier lifted a bit.
Any questions from people online or in the room that they'd like to ask the panel? Okay.
So, let's see, how can I ask the question? My personal opinion is that paper books are better. That they don't need to be plugged into a wall. They don't need to be, the Wi-Fi doesn't need to work. Presumably, all you need to know is how to read. So I'm wondering, to what extent do you feel, as people in the panel, if OER, or otherwise electronic books, I guess maybe not open, but electric forms of book, if their attractiveness is because they are always paired with the idea that you can have this cheaper instead of a paper book, which is more expensive. So is the attractiveness of electronic media so because it's always compared to the alternative? And I guess the next question, the follow-up question to that would be, if there was no electronic version option, would you be inclined to buy a large paper textbook at the price that is being charged?
I think with the electronics, it's definitely, the price is a big thing for, at least for me. I pay for everything out of my own pocket, and so I don't have that money to spend sometimes. If I was offered free books, paperback books, I would be ecstatic because I am like you, I prefer the paper over the electronic. I'd much rather be sitting by a fireplace than sitting by an electrical outlet and reading. However, there are some times that definitely for I had like a psychology class with a textbook and I just couldn't afford it. And so I just didn't buy it and I just shared off to other people. So I think price is a big deal for at least me.
My first inclination is to say I don't want to refute the necessity of paper textbooks at a certain level. I find that perhaps these electronic resources work best in lower level classes, maybe general ed classes, less specialized classes, an intro class, a class that's general biology kind of class. These kind of classes I think they work best in. Once you reach upper division and the classes become more specialized, we're talking about more esoteric topics, then I can understand when maybe paper is going to trump, electronic in this situation, and I agree with that. The biggest thing is just this convenience, the convenience in general, accessible, cheap, it's easy, a link, these things are nice to have. It's easy to find resources, and I like that about them. But I don't want to say that they're going to completely erase paper ever. And in fact, I'm not sure that's even possible with as specific of topics we reach in classes sometimes.
I agree with Bryce. I think we see a correlation with gen ed classes requiring books that are less useful with paperback copies, and I feel like if we had gen eds had electronic books, then the cost would be beneficiary because they are cheaper and you run the risk of just not using them. For my general biology course, I paid for my book through a third-party thrift books website, and it was $5, and I never opened it. He did not require us to read the chapters. It was simply requested. But I know friends who paid the MSSU book price and paid $45 for it, and it was never requested to use for exams, for lab. It was simply just something that he requested and put on our timeline. So I think what Bryce said, that if we had paper books for our upper division courses when topics are more specialized and specific, that it makes more sense to have paper books. However, the cost is still an issue. When we have upper division classes, these are our required classes, and the cost can be make it or break it for many students who don't have access and have to pay for it out of pocket.
And perhaps when we reach a certain level, there can be maybe a certain symbiotic relationship between, electronic resources and paper textbooks, and maybe we can work with that through our education from low level to high level and such.
Well, and as someone who is currently in the graduate program for business here at Southern, I've seen a lot of upper graduate classes use articles or current publications or media in place of textbooks, and that's also worked really well. Some of those have been my favorite classes because the information is current, it's happening immediately. That article might have been published a month ago. Also it's extremely relevant to the field I'm going into and talking about. It's written by people in business, not necessarily by a textbook, by a textbook company, which sometimes can have a different kind of focus. So I think there are options out there. It just depends on what we're able to do with our pedagogy and how we can go forward. That's a great question. Thank you. Any others? I can think of a few, but I don't want to read out somebody else's. So So has the cost of textbooks ever caused you to not take a course or to delay taking a course or to take fewer hours in a semester?
For me, there was one course that I ended up taking, but I almost dropped the course because they had the textbook as well as access codes that were added a week prior to classes starting. And so I did not have time to budget for it. My parents ended up paying for it themselves because I did not have the money to, and they did not want me to drop the course entirely because it was required for my degree. However, if I did not have my parents paying for it, I would have had to drop the class because I would not have the materials needed by the time class started.
I have definitely my freshman year, I had to take into account what the textbook costs were because I had not received as much scholarships as I do now. And so definitely I had to take into account. And I know I dropped biology as one of those things because it had an access code, and I ended up taking psychology and buying that. I didn't buy that book because of that, but I was able to get by with it. So
Yeah, similarly with the access code thing, I had one class where there was this access code, but it was not listed on the book list, and so like first day of class, it was told to us, and that was a bit daunting because it was quite expensive, like $170, and that I didn't get to take that into account for my budget for that semester and such. That was a little worrying. Luckily, I had the financial leeway to buy it, but if I was someone else who didn't, that class probably would have been erased from my schedule. So.
And just to clarify, can we go down the line, say whether or not you're working and how many hours a week you work?
I work at the MSSU Spiva library. I work approximately 19 hours a week.
I work at the Student Success Center at Missouri Southern as a tutor, and I work approximately about 11 to 15 hours a week.
And I work at the Spiva library for about 12 to 15 hours per week.
Hey, Kayla, can you hear me? I have a quick question.
You may or may not want to answer this question. If you don't want to, that's fine. With test banks, have you or anyone you know ever been able to find the answers to quizzes online? Or have you known of someone who's gotten through a class by Googling answers or anything like that? 'Cause one thing is a lot of these textbooks provide test banks with their resources, which helps with, how busy faculty are in developing materials and getting things ready for courses. But the worry is how available they are on the internet.
I have several classes where a lot of my friends were struggling with quizzes and they Googled a question and a Quizlet appeared. And then we do have some that come up and they are through the textbook. However, it costs money to see the test bank answers. So I do see a lot of people who try to use Quizlet or other online quiz sources for tests.
Yeah, I definitely had a roommate that would use Quizlet every time she had a test. However, I think as time went on, the harder the tests were when the professor would definitely make her own questions, it was much, much harder to find the answers. But I think it's not just the online sources, it's also the textbooks too.
Yeah, I'm sure that I've had classmates that use these external resources like Google to cheat on tests, but one thing to point out is some professors, when they put a pretty strict time limit on quiz or test, that makes it pretty difficult to even spend time looking at anything else. I mean, you really have to just focus on what you're doing and get it done. So it can be worked with, but it's not perfect.
Have any of you used, oh, go ahead.
We do have someone online that's wanting to ask a
Oh,
question.
go ahead.
Stephanie, try talking out loud to see if we can hear you. If not, you can type your question in the comments.
Okay, can you hear me?
You guys hear her? No, they cannot.
Okay. I'm not sure. Can anyone hear me?
I can't hear you, but I'm wearing headphones.
Oh, okay. Well, where are the I don't see where I can type in a comment. I just see where it says participants.
Your little bar next to the participants section, there's
Yeah. Do you want me to just ask my question and then you can tell to them? I see the type and name of a participant, but there isn't anything that says I can type a comment.
oh, wait, can you guys hear that now?
I heard a,
Can you guys hear me?
yeah.
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, so I actually teach one of the gen ed classes that you guys may have been referring to that we have the access code. And here's a tricky question for you. I've been looking for a free or low cost OER for several years now. And unfortunately, we can't find any that are as interactive as the one that we use now currently through McGraw-Hill. So we are trying to bring down the cost for our students, but at what point, here's my question for you. Would you rather have a mediocre resource for a class or pay the extra money that gives you like the interactive and really talks about the things that your professor wants you to learn? Because that's kind of where we're at. We're either going to pick a mediocre one or we're going to stick with the one we've been using that we get good feedback with.
Thinking.
I think that I think it depends on your teaching style and how much you utilize that source. I think if you use a mediocre one, as a student, I would want supplemental things like podcasts or other articles that maybe you find that can aid that mediocre text and make it more interactive, more interesting. But I do know that takes a lot of extra time on your part too. That's
Yeah.
a good question.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, if you did choose the mediocre textbook, you would have to supplement it with a lot of extra information and also refute what needs to be refuted and make sure it stays the course of what needs to be learned and what's correct, what isn't, etc. It would be definitely more work. It'd be beneficial to your students, perhaps, but it also may not be because it wouldn't be as good of material to reference. But I guess a big thing is, this interest in OERs and talking about a mediocre one, putting some support to it may in the future create a quality one to be used. So if you don't, like at the moment, you may not be able to use one, but it's good still to consider them for the future so that people actually are interested in making them and editing them and getting bigger names, education, stuff like that on it as editors.
Going with like what Hannah said, it kind of depends on how much they're used in your classroom. If they are used for weekly quizzes where students have to have a certain amount of tests or chapters every week, then I think they're more willing to pay for the extra money to have a more interactive textbook. However, if it's not used as frequently and used periodically throughout the class, then I feel like more students would be willing to have a mediocre textbook to have for that entire semester.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like quality is really important. And I mean, if you have to sacrifice quality, then probably should just stay with the interactive paid textbook. But if you can find a way to maintain quality, then I think a switch to mediocre would not be the worst thing ever.
Well, I do want you guys to know that the majority of faculty on campus are doing what we can to bring the cost down for students. We really are, but we don't want to sacrifice what we're teaching just to get you guys something free, because then we're doing a disservice to you in the long run. So we are here for you. We want you to know that.
And I've had several teachers who have done a lot to give access to certain chapters in the book for students who have not had access to it, do not have time to have the book material, but it's still just one of those, what you said, it's beneficial, but it can also hurt us in the long run too.
Yeah, I would not blame the professors for this. They're using what they can. I have some wonderful professors that will keep books with them, even if it's an older edition, to help those that maybe can't afford the textbooks. It's definitely something with the companies themselves, I think.
Yeah, I mean, in the interest of good education, sometimes you have to make sacrifices in terms of monetary compensation and such to get that. And so at the moment I'm willing, and I think that's kind of what we have to do at the moment too. So.
The one thing I'd just like to state is that faculty is not alone in finding these materials. I have a link on the OER page, on the library homepage, OER consultation. So if you fill out that form and you tell me what you're looking for, I will devote my time to going out and finding whatever I can that can help with that, whether it's supplemental materials, whether it's an open textbook. I think one of the things that needs to be communicated better on this campus is that you guys are not, faculty, are not alone in setting up these materials. You know, I'm here to help you guys. Distance learning is here to help, and we want to help. But understandably, you guys are very protective of your courses, and that's, like I said, understandable. They're your courses. You should be. But at the same time, don't go hopping around on a broken leg without a crutch, you know? We're here to be a support to you, and we want to do that. And that's one of the reasons why I have that interest in OER, is to be a support to faculty and to help them out and to help students out as well. Because the things that I look for, I would not recommend something that I do not think is quality resource to a faculty member. If I don't think it's good, I don't even mention it. I leave it out on the internet to die. So, but that's a great point and great questions. Thank you for bringing those up. Did anyone else online have a question? Have any of you had a course where there was no textbook at all?
Yeah, I've had math courses with no textbook.
But with that, you had the code purchase for the program?
Yeah. It wasn't even a textbook. It was just a program where like quizzes and assignments were compiled and such, and that's where you would turn those things in. But there was no like textbook to it and such.
I think I had a history course. We didn't have a textbook, but we had online articles and resources, and we had weekly reading assignments, but we did not have a textbook to study. The teacher lectured mostly, and then we had resources to read for homework.
And have you had any courses? You can say no if you haven't.
I feel like I have, but I couldn't answer that confidently.
Gotcha. So if, Jocelyn, since you're the one who had one who you remember, if you had to compare that course with like a course with a textbook, would you say there is a difference at all? Or is it pretty much the same experience? What did you feel about it?
Because it was in combination with how the teacher taught, she lectured the whole class and we just wrote it down. So I think some of it was difficult because if we missed it, there wasn't a chapter to go back to read in order to like catch up or reread what she was talking about in class. However, a lot of it was really nice because our articles were, again, online. We didn't have to have any payment to access them. It was just weekly. And then the online articles also heavily related to the class. So it was both. It was a similar, we had the articles that we needed to have to compare to our notes. But if we missed a section of the lecture, then we didn't have a chapter to go back to. We would have to go to the teacher and ask her, what were you discussing in class?
Give everyone a second to breathe. Has there been a particular class that stood out to you, whether it used the traditional textbook or online, free, cost? What's been the class that you feel you've learned the most from? And what teaching methods, resources did they use that you feel made a difference to you?
One of my most memorable classes was Intro to Political Science. The textbook that the teacher selected was a older version, but it was recent enough to where she felt that it covered the material needed. It was the content of the textbook. So it was a very sarcastic, kind of funny nature within the textbook that made jokes and references to pop culture, as well as just put it into, I wouldn't say simplified terms, but in reference to things that college students would relate to. And that made the most difference because reading the textbook was not a chore. It was kind of interesting to read and have it printed out in a way that it was almost like a conversation and how they explained the material. And then that same teacher had chosen another book for a political science class that I have actually used for other classes as a primary source material because it really condensed a lot of material but made it in such a way that it was easy to comprehend. So that book I actually bring with me every year because I've used it 3 times for other courses as a material, as a primary source.
I've had a class where I believe it was modern global history, and there was just a lot of supplemental articles that she added, a lot of like videos and stuff, and it was a semester that we did go online, and it was very easy to adapt that with. I mean, probably not for her, but for us, it was an easy transition because then we were able to work through and watch different videos and read different articles that really supplemented the entire course. And it took place of some of the lectures and stuff that, we weren't able to have. And so I thought that was just a really good class and how that was set up. And then I've had another class on the opposite end where it relied heavily on books. And we read 4 books throughout the semester. And that was really fun because then you had these books that you got to research and get in depth into, and you didn't really look towards other outside references, or she didn't have any extra supplemental. It was just all within that book, and I like that for very separate reasons too.
Yeah, coincidentally, I was actually going to mention modern global history. That class had a lot of further reading in it. Like whenever we read the textbook material or this material presented us to read, there would be extra articles, videos, pictures, and these really helped fill the understanding. That class also had, that semester at least, had an interesting thing we did, which was essentially like a reenactment of an important historical event, like the Simla conference in India. And it was really interesting and really helped reinforce some of the values and principles and ideologies moving through India in that time. And I think that, like, I got a great understanding of history in that moment, and that was a really cool learning device there. But opposite end also had classes with heavily discussion based through the material. So you have the material, you'll read it, go to class, and talk about it, raise questions, talk about those questions, explore concepts and such. And I think there's benefits to both classes, but yeah, I like both of them like that. And those 2 classes were really influential in my first semester at college. I should mention that the second class there used like the Socratic method of teaching, which was really, which I really like, and I've enjoyed every class that uses something like that.
What would you say is your least favorite learning tool that's been used in a course? Any course here or in high school? What's a tool that just you didn't feel you got anything out of, if anything? If there isn't one, that's fine.
I have to come back to that one. That's hard. I feel like I have, but none that's coming to mind right now.
I did take a class, and it was one that we did not have a textbook for, so I remember the one I took. And it was just watching documentaries over different cultures, and then we would take a test over the documentary. And I did great on the test, but I probably couldn't tell you a lot from that class because it was more of short-term memory. Watch the documentary, take the test, get an A, you're done, kind of thing. Whereas stuff that involves reading and note-taking and lecture and just kind of mixes everything together, that sticks with you more, and I feel like I could confidently tell you about those classes and what I learned when they kind of mixed everything together.
I don't know. I really despise videos as a main way of learning. I prefer text and such because it's easier to reference. It's easier to find main concepts. Videos, I find it really difficult to go back through and take notes on it. I don't know. I'm just not a fan of videos in general.
Well, that's coming to the end, and I got about 8 minutes left. Is there any questions from the room or online? Yes.
So, it's kind of along the lines of the last question. So the last question was, is there a class where you felt the tool had no effect? If my memory is serving right, I probably just forgot what has happened. So I have a question. So were you in a class, did you ever have a tool in which you felt like you knew more than you actually did? So did you have like a learning tool like an OER or a shorter book or something like that, which made you feel like you knew the material, but when it came to test time, you screwed it up? Were you ever given the illusion of learning by learning these materials?
I think that'd have to be what Bryce said with videos. After watching the video, I felt like I visually saw it and I knew what the video had talked about. However, when it came to a quiz or a discussion over the concepts or topics discussed in the video, I think I blanked a lot on it and really remembered visuals rather than what they were actually talking about.
I think for one of my classes, it was a language class, learning Japanese, and I think I just started studying in a way that I thought that we quizzed over, and these quizzes were different than this test. And so I studied for these quizzes, and I focused more on grammar and stuff rather than, I guess, vocabulary. And then when it came to the test, I didn't know all those things. I thought I knew everything in the chapter, and I was going to be fine. And then I got my grade back, and it was not what I was expecting. And even when I was taking the test, that wasn't what I was expecting. I don't know if that was necessarily with the material. It may have just been how I was just understanding the class, though.
Yeah, I mean, occasionally just being given handouts or resources to observe, and then frankly on the test they never even appeared, so you study for these things and you prepare and then it's not even there. And in fact, maybe the rest of the class you don't even hear about this concept. It's not a recurring theme and such. And that can be an issue because you're studying and you're just like, well, I want to make sure I know this, but then it doesn't really matter in the end. And it kind of diminishes the quality of the class when you have the situation where they want to present this material, but they don't really act like it mattered. It didn't really seem to be pertinent to what you were learning in the whole class that we should be taking from it and such. So.
What the fascination point is I should mention I'm in the psychology department, and one of the things that I study are the illusions of learning. And one of the things that fascinates me is that I think access to electronic forms of books and videos and things like this inflate the feeling of learning, giving one the sense that, oh wow, you know, I'm really learning something here. When really you're not. You know, it's not like that information stays with you or forever. And so I was curious to hear your take on whether there was something that inflated your sense of knowing the material. So thank you for thinking about that and entertaining me and listening to me.
I actually had an experience kind of similar to that with books, with the electronic book, where and I don't know if this is due to it being an electronic book or because of just the emotional toll. This was last semester, and it's been hard to read, especially print materials. And so I've been listening to much more audiobooks. And so with the electronic version, they're able to read the book to you, which, you know, some people say that they don't like, but I actually found I did better when I had someone reading the book to me than when I tried to read it myself in print or in electronic format. And that's just because normally I read for fun or just, you know, for entertainment, and I haven't been able to all of 2020 pretty much. But audiobooks I still can absorb and keep in my mind, and but not generally, you know, reading print electronically or on paper. So that's my experience.
And I think too that, you know, let me suggest a lot of it is up to the student personally, what they're going to get out of it. You know, if it's really easy, yeah, to scan through an electronic textbook, just watch a video, but not really take any of it, maybe not comprehend any of it. But someone takes the time to understand, to find concepts, main ideas, take notes, good notes, study, then I think that illusion of learning you're mentioning may reduce a bit. But I think that, yes, it is amplified, these sources, but I think that's why students got to practice good study skills, good active listening, active reading, close reading, I think is what's called, and et cetera and such.
Well, we have 2 minutes left. So if there are any last minute questions from online or in the room, now's the time to get them out. Yeah.
So, going back to textbook prices and stuff like that, you had some of you had mentioned something to the effect of having the textbook and then needing to purchase some kind of license fee or something like that, some access to another thing. To what extent are there surprise fees in these textbooks? So you buy the textbook at one price, but then you have to pay for another thing.
I say not frequently, but I have had where you purchase a textbook, but to have access to the online quizzes and sometimes just they have questions that are part of like a chapter you read, and you have to keep doing them while you read the chapter. I've had that come up as a surprise when I pay for the chapter and then it says that this access code or access to the chapter online that goes along with the actual textbook is not included with the actual print book, and it's listed as an access code to the book. So that has come up before, and it's been a surprise because I thought with the purchasing of a print book that the access code would just be included in that fee.
This hasn't happened to me, but I do know of friends that have bought textbooks off of a third party like Amazon that were used, and they didn't come with the access code, and so they thought they were getting it for a lot cheaper, and then they find out, oh, I still have to buy the access code, and it ends up being just as much, maybe even more, because they have to go and find the one with an access code. So
Yeah. For some reason, any class that has this access code always has some issue or surprise come with it. You know, finicky software, barriers, etc. And so, I mean, frankly, I'm just not a fan of them. Always seems to be some problem. But
I know myself in the business course I'm taking this semester, you can buy extra features for your electronic textbook. So like last semester, flashcard ability, like to make flashcards in the book and things like that came with it. But this semester, you have to pay extra to get that feature. So you can still read the book and you still have all the content, but if you want the bells and whistles, you gotta cough up more dough.
Is that fun?
No, that's found out, like, because the original version of the book that was presented in Blackboard is the smart version, which breaks up the chapters a little more and has, like, questions throughout, but I didn't like it. So we went to the, not the smart version, which is just pretty much the textbook in electronic format, and it was very simple. And that's when they were like, well, if you want flashcards, more money. Okay, well, that's all the time we have. Thank you guys so much for your time, and thank you guys for coming online and here. Yay!